Let's do it. This is great. You're great. Thank you for your listening thus far. Awesome group. Just beautiful group. Wonderful opportunity to spend this time with you. All right, here's a question. Okay, so my question is, I'm having difficulty understanding the connection between planetary positioning and personality disposition. It seems intuitively unlikely that, say, every baby born in a hospital in a given location has the same basic personality. Yeah, it's a good question. So what's really at the root of this question, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but how can even the positions of the heavenly bodies reflect anything about us? You know, let alone that twins are born roughly at the same time and they lead different lives. How can it reflect anything about us? And that is really the conundrum of the current paradigm. And that's really the wrestling, that's the powerful intellect, the discerning intellect, just wrestling with itself. Because it's not the current paradigm, it doesn't allow it. It doesn't allow it. You know, it's not, there's no correlation there. There's correlation. There's no, what's the word? There's no direct action of the planets upon us. There's no direct, you can't trace a cause. There's no causality there. You can't trace like, okay, this planet is, you know, exerting this upon us, therefore it affects our character traits. That's the way of thinking about astrology in the kind of current paradigm mindset, but it doesn't, it's the wrestlings, it's the wrestlings of the mind, of the current paradigm mind, trying to grasp it. But what it is a reflective quality. It's not a causal connection. It's a reflective connection. It's a connection that the nature that arises within me and what we see in the heavens are reflections of each other. And it's a different paradigm. It just doesn't really function along the way of our current paradigm. And that's the disorientation that I was talking about. You know, the disorientation, imagine Earth is the center of the universe. And then, no, look, there's this discovery that we're orbiting around the sun and everybody's scrambling saying, no, you know, let's come up with this like ad hoc kind of assumption description of how that observation plugs into our worldview that the Earth is at the center. But eventually it just doesn't work, you know? And so it's a struggle, you know, it's a struggle of the mind with this, though you don't have to actually, that's what we're talking about this fail-safe, is you don't have to sign on to that implication. You don't have to actually believe in order to put your birth chart in front of you, have it deciphered, learn to decipher it and gain the valuable insights. You don't have to, you know, you can doubt it. It's fine. You know, you can still gain those insights. Though there's something else I want to say about that. And that is, what was that I was going to say? Let's see, as a follow-up question. Yeah, so basically there's, okay, so here's the new paradigm in a nutshell. Okay. And this is where the disorientation and the challenge is really going to become real. And this is where the paradigm shift support manual is going to be supportive. The old paradigm. Okay. So what in our current paradigm, what is of this list, what is the largest and what is the smallest? We have the individual, the world, Earth, and the universe. Which is the largest and which is the smallest? You know? So in the current paradigm, you can answer. Yeah, trick question. You can answer in the, I mean, yeah, no, it's obvious. Like in the current paradigm, the largest is the universe. The second largest is the world, Earth, everything, the events transpiring around us. And the smallest unit is us. We're the smallest little unit, right? And the new paradigm is taking that, turning it on its head. I think it's even more drastic than going from the geocentric, the Earth's the center of the universe, to discovering that the sun's at the center of the solar system. It's more dramatic because it turns it on its head. It says that actually the consciousness of the individual is the largest. That's the largest plane of existence. Earth is the second, the world that we encounter here. And when we look up into the sky, we're actually looking into the mainframe. We're looking into the heart of our nature. We're actually, it's like we're looking back through to ourselves. We have a view, a lens into the mainframe, if you want to use like a computer reference, something like that. That's the real disorientation challenge of new paradigm. So I'm going to look on some questions here. Could astrology be just one of many factors that define who we are? Yes, in the sense that for me personally, I wouldn't want to say astrology defines who we are, because then there's an assumption there that I come into this life and my birth chart defines me, as in puts a limit or a parameter around who I am. I would say it as astrology is a different way of looking at yourself. You're looking at your birth chart. So we could look at ourselves in the mirror. You know, we could look, I have a mirror behind me. I could, pick this up and go and look in the mirror at myself. And that's a way of looking at myself. But what's going on there is I'm looking at the surface of myself. I'm looking at the surface of my being, what I look like on the surface. I've got skin, hair, everything, clothes. I'm seeing what's on the surface. I could chop my face or my arm or something and look at myself in a different way and see what's inside myself, right? But what if there was a mirror that could show us the inside of our psyche? The inside of our psyche. That's the birth chart. It's just a portal. Like you have a portal in a boat, you just look out and you can see out into something, or you have a lens, like a microscope, you can see into something. It's just a lens. So it doesn't define. It doesn't put any parameters on us, limitations. One of the things that defines us is just a way of looking, and we don't have to look at it. Nobody's obligated to look at it. But we do look at it. It brings up fundamental questions that challenge our current paradigm and our current worldview. All right, so let's look at some more questions here. Let's look at some more questions here. How are different heavenly bodies associated with different traits as expressed in humanity? That is, how is it known which heavenly body represents which trait? I think, let me see, how are different heavenly bodies associated with different traits as expressed in humanity, and how is it known which heavenly body represents which trait? If I'm interpreting this question correctly, I would say the study of astrology is how you know, because then you study what the archetypes of the planets are and you become familiar with them, and they tell you what, and I should probably define what an archetype is. An archetype, each planet is an archetype, and an archetype is like a basket of symbolism. It's like a big umbrella of symbolism that covers within it everything of a type. So there's a variety of things, almost like an infinite variety of things, but they're of a type, of a kind. And so we get to know those archetypes like in the way that you get to know a person. You get to know the archetype of Mars, for instance. You get to know the archetype of Neptune. You get to know the archetype of the moon. And it's easy enough to grasp, but complex enough to almost like have a personality. And then once you know them, you see them. You see them. You look at a birth chart and you're like, wow, it's the ingredients. Those archetypes are the ingredients that make all of us up, but they're added in little different, they're added in different amounts at different times. So, it's like a different meal. We each have different meals, but the ingredients are all the same. They're just kind of, more amount of this, less amount of that. So hopefully that answers your question. It's a process of discovery. And that's why one of the reasons why the archetypes were associated with the gods and the goddesses back in the day, because when we see them in the world, like, oh, that's very lunar. That's very Neptunian. So it's the archetype of the moon, the archetype of Neptune coming into a specific physical manifestation, the way the gods and goddesses used to put on, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, would come and seduce humans. And when she would come, she would take on a disguise of a woman or something, and that's kind of like an old way of describing this archetypal concept that, that the archetypes show up in our lives, and they're individuals, distinctive individuals, but they're also representatives of the divine. Getting deep here. Okay. I think if we define what archetypes are, then how do they hold truth? But also, if we are the divine, then who's to say we don't inherently know? I think I understand what you mean there, but I'm not totally sure. If we are the divine, then who is to say we don't inherently know? If we define what the archetypes are, then how do they hold truth? Oh, if we define what the archetypes are, how do they hold truth? So we don't actually know what the archetypes are. When we discover a new planet, a new body, we don't know what that archetype is. We just observe. Like we see when it crosses a point, or when somebody's born, like for instance, with their natal sun on that archetype, we just look at them. And then we look at a bunch of people like that, like maybe 10 people whose natal sun was on that archetype when they were born. And so their core sense of identity is linked with that. And so we study, like, what is this archetype? I don't know. Oh, it's beginning to show up like this, beginning to show up like this. And this has been studied for thousands of years. That's why the archetype of the sun and the moon and Mars and Venus are so fleshed out, because it's just been, passed on, this continued study. And I mean, one of the joys for me as an astrologer is I just get to watch. I learn every day new manifestations of the archetypes. It's like getting to understand a new facet of a friend every day. Let's see. And if we are the divine, then who is to say we don't inherently know? Yeah, I mean, in the end, the whole act is divine. I mean, the whole act, everything is like when we see these people around us, they're all distinct, these events are distinct, but yet they're representing the archetypes at play being reflected in the mainframe, in our view of the mainframe. And so we can kind of see them as archetypes, but we can also see them as them. We can see ourselves, we can see, how our birth chart kind of colors our whole view of the world. But it's all divine, and that's got to be a personal kind of discovery. That's kind of a personal path of connecting, of just how divine everything is, even the really difficult challenges, amazingly difficult challenges, that even in that they're cut from the fabric of the divine. Okay. I'm with you on how the heavens are reflective of one's psyche. What I'm struggling with is translating how the understanding of that can help someone in their life. Can you give an example, even a hypothetical one, of how this understanding can translate to a practical benefit? I'm with you on how the heavens are reflective of one's psyche. Right. Okay. What I'm struggling with is translating how the understanding of that can help someone with their life. It goes back to the optics, like for instance, I was dedicated to the path of meditation. I still meditate, but I was dedicated to the path of meditation exclusively for years and years and decades. And then when I discovered my birth chart, I learned things about myself that all those decades of meditation didn't reveal to me. Some things that I was kind of down on about myself, that I looked and I was like, oh, that's what that is. That's kind of cool, or something like, for instance, a client who has these like deep emotional reactions that she feels actually throw her off. But then what we discover is that's really kind of part of her power. And once there was a sense of accepting and owning of that, then it became like, wow, this was something I've been resisting my whole life, but it actually has its own power that can fill out my role and kind of be something in the world of my side of myself that I was holding back before. I was working with a couple, and there's dynamics between them where if there wasn't the insight of the birth chart, it might not have worked out, because there was a sense that, oh man, things are really going bad. Let's just cut it. But the birth chart revealed is like, well, actually, it's this and this and this is happening. Optics, we can see underneath, like, actually what's happening is this and this and this. Okay, well, let's stick with it. Oh, good. It's cool. It turns out. So that's like a real, I mean, that's a big difference, without the optics, and with it is like a totally different life course. Okay, let's look at some more questions here. What are the most common Sun, Moon, Venus, Mars aspects in twin flames, if you're familiar with that? So, okay, twin flames, encountering, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this totally right, but encountering someone you feel shares like the same soul as you. And there's kind of like a sense of having been divided and then reuniting in life, having been divided before birth and then through birth and coming into life, being reunited as, you're separate and then you're reunited. Well, this is kind of a technical question, but generally with people, let's see, how should I approach this? Well, there's a way to look at the charts to understand how we interact with each other. You can look at your chart and your mother's chart, your father's chart, your brother's chart, your friend's chart. With this friend, I'm really funny. With that friend, I'm really, we tend to be more quiet and do art together or something. And you can look in the charts and you can see how what the two charts bring out of each other and what the relationship brings out of each other. And so when you have sun and the moon in harmony in a chart, there tends to be a comfortability. Sun and the moon, basic yin and yang aspects in a person's life. There tends to be just a natural comfortability with the people, if there's a harmonious aspect between this. Venus and Mars, if there's a harmonious aspect, there tends to be a natural kind of flirtation, attraction. If there's a tense aspect, then it can be kind of an intense flirtation attraction, which sometimes people want. But when you're talking about something like twin flames, what are called the transpersonal planets, for instance, Pluto and Neptune, much more, those are archetypes that are transpersonal. They transcend the personal. They connect us with things that are beyond our immediate body and biography. And those, when they're connected with the sun, the moon, Venus, Mars, they let in aspects that feel big and very spiritual, sometimes confusing. They can really kind of bring in things that can't be explained by our current paradigm at all. Like feeling like you're melting with somebody, uniting with them, or feeling like a magnetism to somebody or to something that it's like, it's so powerful that you're out of control. Like things like that. That's the optics. When the optics go into the birth chart, we look for Neptune and Pluto. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. I like the description of astrology, a process of reflection rather than causation, not either or with science or religion, rather using chart plus personal circumstance, synthesize self-understanding, if I'm understanding correctly. Thank you. In biblical lore, the wise men followed the North Star to find Jesus. Would you consider these stories as metaphorical in some sense to the new paradigm, looking to the heavens to find direction, purpose, and the divine? That's a great frame. I mean, now that you say it that way, I look at it that way. The description of the three wise men is the description of three astrologers. Really, astrology was very active back then. And they were apparently very talented astrologers to be able to locate Jesus. But it's still, it is astrology, but we have a chance now of coming into a new paradigm that really synthesizes what they have with what the current paradigm has, that actually can be something that's more than the sum of its parts, I feel. That's what I feel in this current paradigm. Okay, can an astrology reading tell us, A, what our gifts are, life purpose, i.e. how we fit in, and B, how far into the future can a reading guide us in relationships, career, etc.? So to part A, what is our gifts and life purpose? Yes. That's the whole point of this talk. Definitely 100% resounding yes. Life purpose, I mean, our life purpose is to be ourselves, like to be our nature. And the astrology reveals what that is. And it, in many ways, it affirms what that is, because we haven't been totally blind. We've been fumbling in the dark through life maybe, but we've intuited our way to know some stuff about ourselves. And when we see the chart, it affirms what we believe in our hearts about ourselves. And then it goes further elucidation. How far into the future can a reading guide us in relationships, career, etc.? I usually like to look at through the next year. It gives a good rhythm of unfolding for the next year. If you start getting into 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, the thread, it's almost like you picture a thread of a tapestry and it's really tight. You know how they have those rugs and tapestries where the thread is really tight and then you start getting to the ends and it's like fraying out a little bit. For me, at least, when I'm giving readings, if it goes like more like 2 years out, 3 years out, the further it gets out, the thread is harder to hold onto because we don't know the transpiring events yet that lead towards that. You know, like when we know where you're at now, and then we can see the rhythm of life unfolding over the next year, 3 months, this 3 months has this focus, this 3 months has this focus, this 6 weeks has this focus. It's easier to get the rhythm. You start getting further out, it starts getting more difficult. And then my question is always why? Why get even further out than that? You know, my hope is always with astrology that we can become even more present. Like when we can get the sense of the rhythm of our unfolding of our life, it can help us be present. Like, okay, if I know the next 3 months are going to be about this theme, then I can address my present in this way. I can, I know that, and I do this all the time. I did it with this webinar and with the release of the Paradigm Shift Support Manual. I can see like, okay, here's crunch time, here's reflective time, here's productive time. Okay, where am I in that? Okay, I'm in productive time. Okay, let me switch into that gear, right? And so it's very helpful, very practical in that way. If we start looking too far out, it starts getting, if it unanchors us from the present, then I usually stay away from it. Okay. The biggest challenge I see with astrology is the risk of confirmation bias. How is this addressed? I feel the best way to address it is in yourself, just to be with your birth chart and what it's revealing and sit with it and just not concern yourself with anybody else's confirmation bias and just be with yourself and see what feels right. Because that's what the birth chart, in my estimation, should be, is the act of connecting with ourselves and what feels right. I mean, we want to connect like into our nature, like sit into it, be in it, be good, be aligned. It's almost like you see martial arts guys who will be like, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to align myself. And then, somebody's standing like an inch away from their fist and they punch and the guy goes flying. And because they're aligned with themselves. And so much in our lives these days, we are just we get like distracted, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of misunderstanding about myself, a little bit of preoccupation with another person or event. And there isn't really the punch of power that we have by just really being aligned with our nature. And if that happens, I'm not here because I'm just wanting to force astrology on anybody. I'm going to guess that probably Copernicus wasn't trying to force the heliocentric on anybody, especially since the Catholic Church was not totally happy about it. And some people were getting executed. So he wasn't there to force it on anybody, but he saw it and saw the value of it and wanted to share it. And so the same thing here, that's what I want to share, is the value of it and the paradigm shift of it, really, that I feel is the shift. That's what I want to share. Though what matters to me really is that the individual is able to settle into that sense within themselves where they're able to really kind of access their nature, their power, the bliss. I mean, that bliss that's mentioned in the scriptures is a real thing. And kind of a different relationship to life that is it's not so at odds with itself. It's not so at odds with itself. Okay. All right, let's see. So this is a great, awesome community here because some of community members are actually answering other people's questions here. So it's not just me, it's a conversation. I'm seeing other people answer other people's questions. Okay. What are some key factors in our chart that we should look at to find our life's path? Some examples. Okay. Key factors in your chart to look at to find our life's path. Type into your browser astrotheme.com. This is just one of many sites, a lot of sites out there. Just one of them. I'm not partial. The reason why I say that one is you'll type in astrotheme.com go about 2/3 of the way down the page on the left, and it says horoscope and ascendant. You're going to click on that, and it'll basically ask for your birth data. Where were you born? When were you born? What time you were born? If you don't know what time you're born, it's not the end of the world. You can still get a lot of insight. If you know what time you're born, then you get more insight. You type that in, a chart comes up. In that chart, one of the reasons why I use that site is because you'll see red lines and you'll see blue lines. It's like a circle, and then there's these looks like little laser down through the center of it. You see red lines, you see blue lines. The red lines show the tense angles in the chart. The blue lines show the soft angles in the chart. What does that mean? Tense angles. It'll show these glyphs, which are the planets, little symbols. You can hover over them. It says what they are. And the red lines are tense angles between the planets, and the blue lines are soft angles between the planets. And what that shows us is where it's a soft angle, it's where we came into life with that combination of those two symbolisms kind of flowing, kind of easy. And where the tense angles are, you'll see is that where we come into life and it's just like, we got to figure it out. Something's really challenging. We got to figure it out. And that's what you want to look for. That's why, you're born, you're going through your life, you look at your friend, they have this section of life, like home and garden, whatever, like really figured out, dialed in, whereas yours is a mess, but you got your finances dialed in, whereas theirs is a mess. And you look at their chart and you can see like, oh, okay, where I have soft angles, they have hard angles. Where I have hard angles, they have soft angles. And so those red ones are the ones I like to look at in the beginning, because that shows where the challenges are in our life, and that shows where the strengths are. That shows where the strengths want to come from, because we got to figure it out, man. Like we gotta figure it out. We got to rise to the occasion and figure it out. And that's what we're all doing. We're all trying to intuit and figure it out and intuit our way through without the birth chart. Everybody is doing this. Every human being is doing this. They say, have pity. Everybody's going through their own silent battle or whatever. We're all doing this, and we're trying to intuit and just figure it out. And when you look at the chart, you see, okay, those are the hard angles. And it gives you some optics about what is the theme that's happening here? What is the actual projected strength of that? And we say, oh, okay. Like it's beginning to make more sense. And what is the approach? What is the approach? So hard angles and soft angles, there's a lot more there about life's path. If you're talking about career, you look at the top of the chart, midheaven. If you're talking about home, you look at the bottom of the chart. If you're talking about, the chart paints a portrait. And so you want to get the synthesis of the whole portrait. Like we could go to the National Gallery somewhere and look at a work of art and be like, oh, look, there's green there. There's orange there. There's yellow there. There's black there. But the synthesis of the birth chart is stepping back and seeing how all the colors combine to make the image, and that's the portrait. That's the story. And that's what we want to get. And that's what gives the optics into our life path. Okay. I'm going to give you a heads up that in about 5 minutes, we're going to wind it down and we're going to conclude this webinar that I'm so grateful that you're here attending. Okay. All right. So this is great. Everybody's some great answers actually to people's questions. If you haven't seen the chat, this is amazing. Confirmation meaning tightly held assumptions that get reinforced by reading. Yeah, it's a good question. Confirmation bias again. It's like it's a journey. I mean, the confirmation bias is actually part of what is there in the portrait, to actually see like, what is that about you? Like what is the confirmation bias coming up for you? Like what is coming up for you around the confirmation bias? And then looking at your chart and seeing how that plays in there, and then take it or leave it. You know what I mean? Okay. So there's a funny question here by Riz Verata, which maybe he leaned on his keyboard for a while there. Okay, so site name again, astrotheme.com. Again, answered by another member of our beautiful community here. Do you use a house system, traditional astrology, modern astrology? I'm an archetypal astrologer. House system, archetypal astrology, we look a lot at the aspects. House systems, I tend towards the whole sign system, maybe with a bit of Placidus in there. Only those familiar with astrology will know what that means. That's okay. Yes, Sylvia, thank you. You go to astrotheme.com, go down on the left side, halfway down the page, click on horoscope and ascendant, type in your birth information. All right. Beautiful. If just look at this last narrative here by Barbara. Beautiful. Okay, so with that beautiful narrative, we're going to begin to sign off here. And I want to thank you all for joining me. I want to keep on talking, but I can't. So come to the next session. Come to the next. I think I'll put it in here again. Let me see here. Yeah, that's the next session. If you're interested in meditation, you can come to the next one. Check out the Paradigm Shift Support Manual. Check it out. It's going to connect you up with a lot. Actually, through that, you can access the entire Great Shift ebook series. There's a series, and it's let the adventure continue. Let the adventure continue. Join me one-on-one. I'd love to meet you. Check out the Paradigm Shift Support Manual. Thank you so much for your precious time. I know how precious time is in this day and age, and we have such a beautiful community here tonight. So I want to thank you so much. Keep a lookout in your emails. You're going to get, again, the link to the Paradigm Shift Support Manual. Also, the recording of this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hugs to all. Beyond words. No words. Too much gratitude. Bye now.